ladies and gentlemen, I've been asked about the proper place of peer review in science. Peer review and consensus in science, scientific journals and so on. Now there's a system in place right now where if you're going to get your stuff published, it has to be approved by other people in your field. Now this has led to some really bizarre things, like to be published in the Journal of Sociology, other sociologists have to read your article and approve of it. And so this guy named Sokal, I think, S-O-K-A-L, he sent in a paper saying that science is relative to culture, so the scientific method in one culture isn't necessarily valid in other cultures. And he sent it in as a sort of a practical joke, and they approved it. Now this is a peer-reviewed journal. So maybe you're going to say now, well, sociology's crap, but science itself, physics or whatever, needs peer review. Evolutionary theory journals need peer review or something. Well, let's take a look at that for a second. If peer review would have been used to stifle innovation in the past, we would have not gotten, for example, Copernicus's work, and Galileo, and Isaac Newton probably would have been rejected if there were a peer review situation like there is today. And it doesn't necessarily follow when you say people in the field are going to check the work that's proposed to be published. It doesn't necessarily follow that those people are going to do a good job, or that they're going to have the interests of the field of science at their interests, at their best. They're not going to be interested in the field of science necessarily. Maybe, but maybe not. For example, there are people who are not interested in talking about the electric nature of the interplanetary space. We shot that Galileo thing, orbiter I think it was called, Galileo, towards that meteor, and then we sent the projectile out and hit the meteor, and we're going to take pictures of it and see what's made of inside and stuff. Just one problem. It's not a meteor, it's an asteroid, I think. Just one problem. One of the scientists said, that's going to have an extraordinary electrical charge. And everybody else said, bah humbug, we never heard of electricity in space, what are you talking about? Well, what do you know? There was a massive electrical discharge when the item hit, and all the sensors and stuff were overwhelmed. Well, some people are trying to figure out what's going on with electricity in space, and what other things it's going to affect, and what other phenomena it might be causing. But some people don't want to talk about that because their entire thesis is tied up in stuff which will be made slightly obsolete by this. And whole projects costing billions of dollars are slated over the next, several years or whatever. And the people involved don't want this completely new sideline to become the focus, because they do not have the interests of science itself at stake. They just are trying to get their next grant or whatever for the next study. So that's what peer review is doing today. People who think of peer review as good don't ever question whether or not the peer review journalists, it's like they are platonically endowed to be perfectly moral and rational. No, that might not be the case. You cannot always say that peer review is your religion. Peer review in the past has done some pretty creepy things and made fun of people who ended up being right. And so peer review doesn't, I think, have a place in science except as a way to recreate this guy's experiment or whatever. That, I think, is where consensus and peer review does belong in science. I should be able to do the experiment that you're publishing your paper about, and I should be able to get the same results. I shouldn't, however, be able to read your paper and say, I don't like what this is saying, you can't be published. And that's what peer review has come down to today, to keep people silent who don't agree with the community. That's not proper. No, science should be that you should say anything you have evidence for, and other people check on it. Review your work. But today, they review your work before you get published and stop you getting published. This is different. This is not right. That's where consensus belongs in science. We should be able to check each other's work, but you shouldn't be able to stifle people's work because you disagree. And unfortunately, that's where it is today.